From real truffles to champagne, camel milk to Japanese swords, we travelled around the world to find the hidden stories behind many luxury products. Our first stop is somewhere in the south of England, where we came to hunt for truffles. The exact location is kept tightly under wraps, as these fungi are such a highly prized treasure. Luxury cousins of the mushroom, truffles are an indulgent food enjoyed across the world. But these fragrant fungi will cost you. In 2014, the world's largest white truffle was flown to New York, accompanied by a security guard, and sold at auction for $61,000. Discovered in Italy, this gigantic fungus weighed almost 2 kilos. So what is it that makes them so expensive? There are a lot of types of truffle. There are at least 40 species, many of which aren't edible, and new species have been discovered as recently as 2018. You've probably seen luxury truffle products in supermarkets or fancy restaurants. But the unique truffle flavour you recognise might not be real truffle at all. Cheap truffle oil often hasn't been anywhere near a real truffle. Many cheaper truffle products use 2,4-dithiopentane, a synthesised compound containing one of the main aromatic components of foot odour, guaranteed to give it that earthy taste. Real truffles are seasonal and pricey, with a short shelf life. They were originally sniffed out using truffle pigs, but while pigs are very good at finding truffles, they're also very good at eating them too. And these days, dogs are much more common truffle hunting companions. These fungi can be found across the world, but they all require a very specific climate to grow. While different varieties may have somewhat different requirements, one thing is certain: you can't have truffles without trees.
Truffles are always found with trees, and they have to be the right type of trees. Under the ground, the truffle is just the fruiting body, so in equivalent of an apple. And we've also got a lot of then what we call the mycelium, microscopic level threads, up to 100 metres in a teaspoon of soil. And this mycelium is actually attached to the roots of a tree, like the fingers on a glove onto a hand. And it sort of extends the reach of the tree out, and it actually takes that water and nutrients and passes them through the tree, and the tree gives it sugars in return, so to help the truffles, the fruit, develop.
Even when you have exactly the right conditions, truffles aren't guaranteed, and hunting them is a labour-intensive process. Once you know where to look, you have to sniff out and dig up each truffle by hand, and they can be tricky to find.
Good boy, thank you, good boy, come. So he's told us it's there, it's still in the ground, so do I want to take it out of the ground or not? It all depends on if it's ripe. If it's unripe, there's no point in having it. So the nose comes into play, and we actually sniff the ground for it.
It may take a while, but finding a good one can make it worth the work.
Yeah, that's a nice one. Yeah, that's probably about 70-80 grams.
Truffles also have a short season, often appearing for only a few months of the year. And even when you do get your hands on them, they don't last for long.
An unripe truffle, unlike a tomato, which you could cut from the vine and ripen on your windowsill, once a truffle is out of the ground, the clock is ticking, it's just sort of slowly going to degrade over time. So we want to get that to customers nice and fast.
After just 5 days out of the ground, that pungent truffle smell will have halved. You can farm many truffle varieties, besides the rare Italian whites. And many people have been successful in setting up truffle orchards, but it's not easy. Trees need to be planted in the right soil conditions, inoculated with truffle fungus, and often irrigated constantly. It can take as long as 6 years before you get a good truffle harvest, and there's no guarantee that the fungi will grow at all. So after all that effort, what do they actually taste like?
Oh.
The smell just made me think it was going to be really strong. The flavour's actually quite subtle. There's a nuttiness there, there's like an earthy flavour there.
Actually quite light and fragrant. It tastes a lot nicer than it smells. It smells like damp socks.
That's good. I mean, this is the first time I actually eat a truffle by itself. You know, it's a bit like mushroom, but it's more of a meaty bite.
These days, farming has taken over as our primary source of truffles, and today 70% of the world's truffles are cultivated. Through the loss of woodland and climate change, the number of wild truffles has decreased significantly. Since the 19th century, production in France has fallen from over 1,000 tonnes a season to just 30 tonnes, and climate change could mean that truffles will disappear altogether in the future.
The weather conditions are so important, not just immediately over the whole season. We're getting much lower numbers and much lower average size. A truffle is something like 70% water, so it needs rainfall to help it grow. Some UK truffle scientists are thinking that your traditional areas, the climate is going to move further north, and they're not going to have a truffle industry within, I think, perhaps 50 years. There's threats, there's opportunities, but rain, we do need rain. When we get a dry summer, the holiday makers are delighted, but I keep crossing my fingers for a bit of rain every now and again.
Not far away, in the town of Lowestoft, is a factory that's been producing watercolour brushes for over 150 years. And there are only 9 people in the world trained to make these brushes. Making a Series 7 Kolinsky Sable watercolour brush isn't easy. The largest size brush can take almost a week and a half to make. You can pick up a cheap synthetic brush for under $2, but a Series 7 could cost you over $300. So why would anyone pay for a brush that costs over 100 times the price? Originally created on the request of Queen Victoria, the Series 7 brush was first made in 1866 and was designed to be the finest possible brush for watercolour painting. Since then, the skill and craftsmanship that goes into making each one of these brushes has remained exactly the same. To achieve this, the company needed skilled brush makers, and so, in 1946, set up a new factory in Lowestoft, England, a fishing town with a history of rope making. This factory now makes over 25 million brushes a year. The intricate work and dexterity required means that these brushes are almost exclusively made by women. It takes 3 years to train, and there are only 9 brush makers in the world that can make these top-of-the-range Series 7 brushes.
I joined here when I was 16. I worked 18 years, and then I had 12 years off, and I've been back 11, so that's 28 years I've been working for the company. When you first start, you would probably only make a few. You've got to get, like anything, you've got a skill and you build on that, and you get to learn the skill and then you get to do the speed.
The components play a big part in the cost. Each brush head is made from Kolinsky Sable, a Siberian weasel that's hair is said to cost 3 times the price of gold by weight. These weasels are hunted sustainably every spring under CITES guidelines across Siberia and Manchuria. Only guard hairs from the tail will do. Kolinsky hairs are chosen because every single strand has a surface of directional, interlocking scales, increasing the surface area and giving the hairs their strength. And while many other natural and synthetic hairs are used for brushes, nothing has quite matched the quality of Sable. Once the hairs are cleaned and graded, it's time to start making the brush. The wool has to be removed with a comb, and the hairs are packaged up and carefully boiled and ironed. The brushes have to be made with hair at its natural length, and the skilled brush makers can effortlessly separate between 28 and 32mm length hairs just with their hands. This skill takes years of training and practice. The 9 brush makers each have 27 years of experience on average. Hairs that are blunt or twisted have to be discarded, and most importantly, as each natural hair comes to a point, every hair must be the correct way up. The removed upside-down hairs can be flipped and reused. Every single hair is checked over by hand. The smallest brush-sized hairs are just 7 millimeters long, shorter than an average eyelash.
We can't afford to let standards drop in any way, shape or form. What I would say from that is what this factory has is hand skills. It has individual skills. It has skills that when I have new people come in here, they don't sometimes believe that this kind of work still happens. We show them what people do, they will turn around and say, I'll never be able to do that. But they will be able to do that if they understand that quality comes first.
When the hairs are all sorted, they're ready to go into the cannon. The bundle is tied together and gently twisted through. Individual hairs are added or taken away until it's an exact fit.
They need to have that fine point to work with, that basically it has that colour carrying capacity, that the brush won't split or do anything that it shouldn't do, basically. Through the hair that we use, through the skills of our makers and how they make them, we've done everything we possibly can to make sure that we have produced the best product we possibly can.
Then it's time to attach the handles. The factory uses birchwood handles imported from Italy. The brush is glued into place, and then the brush heads are crimped onto the handles. This crimping process bends the metal to shape and keeps the handle tightly attached to the brush. Once the paintbrush is assembled, it needs to be branded and tested. The size and logo of each brush is stamped in gold on the handle. Wet point testing assures that everything works exactly as expected, and there aren't any loose or crooked hairs. Each brush is then gummed, a process that gives the brush head its final shape and allows it to bounce back. The shape of the natural hairs gives the brush a wide belly and a fine point.
So the key to art brush making is the people, and that is the skill. We retain knowledge from generation to generation. So we have makers now that are working under an apprenticeship of a 49-year served brush maker who himself had an apprenticeship under another 49-year serving brush maker who was brought into the business under his father who made brushes directly for Queen Victoria. And it's very key that we retain that knowledge throughout the business, generation to generation, and we are now bringing in the next generation to make sure that we uphold the very high quality standards that we base ourselves on.
In the 150 years that these brushes have been used, art across the world has evolved. Modern and contemporary artworks are often controversial, but each work can fetch millions of dollars. Modern art is expensive. From completely white canvases to simple abstract colours, these seemingly basic works can cost you millions. So what makes their price so high? And how can they possibly be worth this much money? Modern art is a wide field, covering everything from around 1870 to 1970. But say modern art to someone on the street, and chances are they possibly picture something like this. At the turn of the century, art changed. From the birth of abstract impressionism to the minimalists, and even performance art. Art was no longer just about representing the world with skill.
Well, that skill faded away after photography was invented. Once photography was invented, that was a skill that camera could do, so artists no longer felt that that was their primary reason for making art. Art isn't about beauty, it never was really.
Art generally became more conceptual and more challenging, but this change wasn't popular with everyone. In a 2016 study of the British public, 28% of people don't consider this art, 65% of people don't think this is art, and 83% of the public definitely don't consider this to be art. Over 100 years after its creation, the work is still somehow as divisive and controversial as ever with the public. But that hasn't stopped record prices being set.
I think most people think that modern or contemporary artists are having a laugh at their expense, and nobody wants to feel a fool.
For many who are immediately dismissive of these pieces, frustration also often comes when they see the price.
Most of us, I think, tend to be cynics, and we, I think, a lot of times associate art with value, and that I think that triggers the question of, well, why is it that much, or why such a high value if, I could probably do this. I think unless you're in the market and actively buying art, there's no need to look at art and think of a price tag. It shouldn't be the way you look at art.
For the artists involved, what looks simple can be the culmination of a lifetime's work. Take the Black Square, for example, painted by turn-of-the-century avant-garde artist Kazimir Malevich. This simple black painting didn't come out of nowhere. It's the result of 20 years of simplification and development. When it was shown, the Black Square was a revolutionary symbol, exhibited at the top corner of the room, a spot reserved for Orthodox religious icons. Making this work wasn't exactly an easy decision either, and in 1930, Stalin's regime confiscated Malevich's artworks and manuscripts, and he was jailed for 2 months.
Yes, the white canvases or the black canvases are very rarely all they've done. They haven't just come out of school and said, I'm going to paint a black canvas. I mean, as much as we might think we could do that, yes, we could do that. But the artist has thought of it and probably had a journey, quite a long journey, and a process to get there.
The works aren't just made for profit. It's often only after the artist is dead that the art can fetch the incredible price that it's reached today. In 2008, one of Malevich's abstract works sold for $60 million. And the demand for these important modern works is only going to increase.
The natural trend is for you to see a rise in prices, but that's because these true masterpieces are rarer to find because they're really all in museums.
But setting an actual price can be tough. In the end, the value is only going to be what people are willing to pay.
As long as there's going to be artists producing, there's always going to be sort of shifts in tendencies and taste, I would say also, in taste in the market.
It seems like every year there's a new record price, and as extreme wealth inequality increases, so do the number of millionaires willing to pay the fortune required for these works. No matter what the artist intended, art is now seen as an easy investment by many, and companies have appeared that treat art purely as an asset for financial gain. But despite the ever-increasing prices of the modernist masterpieces, for 99% of the artists out there, their work has always been a labour of love.
There are obviously people out there with a lot of money who view art just to be a commodity, nothing else, but there's going to be people who purchase or engage with it because they take genuine pleasure from it, or it stimulates them, or they feel it enriches them. I'm an abstract painter, not really dealing much with form. I became quite obsessed. I was painting all day and all night, and it was just something that really kind of took a hold of me. So it's not easy being an artist in London. There's a lot of really good talent out there. I think you've really got to be good to actually make any money. You don't have the, I suppose, network initially. Yeah, it's a really expensive habit, to be honest. I suppose everybody's got devices, but it's my kind of passion and hobby. So that's where all my time, effort and kind of spare finances go.
Trends in the market may change, and prices will shift, but the popularity of modern and contemporary art isn't going anywhere. Up in the clear lochs of Scotland, thousands of oysters are grown each year, but they weren't always the symbol of luxury that they are today. Oysters are a sure sign of high-end decadence, but look back 200 years and they were handed out as free bar snacks. So what made them the luxury food that they are today? Oysters have been around for a while. Estimates put the shellfish around 300 million years old, at least, and humans have been enjoying them for centuries. Oyster cultivation was invented by Sergius Arata, a Roman engineer also often credited with the invention of underfloor heating. And since his invention, oyster farming has become big business. While you may be seeing oysters on the menu more these days, their popularity now is nothing compared to just 200 years ago. Oyster sales boomed from the early 19th century onwards, and the shellfish were sold as street food across London, Paris, and New York as they remained a cheap and accessible snack to many. In 1860, the small British seaside town of Whitstable alone was sending 50 million tons of oysters to London each year. And by 1900, New York was eating 1 million oysters every day. But as their popularity grew, so did the problems. Industrialisation and dredging of the waters in England led to overfishing. And as more people moved to the coast, more and more sewage ended up dumped in oyster-growing waters. Soon there were outbreaks of typhoid and other diseases, and many oyster beds had to be closed. Hard winters and new diseases killed off many of the remaining native oysters, and gave the shellfish a bad reputation that lasted for years to come. There's something else that kept the price of oysters down around the turn of the century: child labour. In the early 20th century, American photographer Lewis Hine captured photographs of many of the children working in the oyster industry, even photographing 4-year-old Mary, who would apparently shuck 2 pots of oysters each day. Things had to change though. We soon realised the importance of clean water in the oyster growing process and outlawed child labour. Making oysters environmentally safe and ethical to grow came at a cost, as the shellfish take a lot of work to produce. And now, when oysters are raised, the environment they're grown in is one of the main considerations.
Here, there's no industry, there's very little even farming here. What you've got out in the loch is just everything that is naturally in the loch. So they're feeding on the best possible feed that you could want, and they couldn't be in any more natural product.
Each oyster takes 2 to 3 years to mature, and they start out microscopically small. The tiny shellfish are grown in hatcheries. When they're large enough, they're transplanted to their final growing place.
Well, we get the oysters in from our hatchery when they're about your thumbnail size. We will grow them in these baskets for approximately 2 to 3 years, and then we'll send them to the depuration centre for depurating and then for packing for dispatch.
At Loch Fyne, every oyster is depurated, a process that cleans the oysters and removes any dangerous bacteria. Every single oyster must be checked by hand. Making sure that each oyster is shipped live is paramount.
Believe it or not, we sell roughly about 35,000 oysters every week out of here, and every single oyster is individually checked. So what we would do is, when we're packing the oysters, we'd pick up 2 oysters and we would tap them together. Now, you can obviously see that one's dead, but when you're packing thousands at a time, you won't necessarily see it, and sometimes it's only open just a little tiny bit. But when you tap that oyster, you can hear it's hollow straight away, and that is the best way to tell if an oyster's going to reach its shelf life, whether it should be discarded.
Oysters may only have a 9-day shelf life, but that doesn't stop them being shipped all across the globe. And their popularity and image as a luxury treat means that their demand is only going to rise. Another sure sign of luxury, real champagne. Grown only in this small region of northeast France, a vintage bottle could cost you thousands. Champagne is synonymous with wealth and luxury. It often costs double the price of other sparkling wines, such as Prosecco or Cava. A decent quality bottle of it can cost you anywhere from $50 to $300, and vintages can often sell for thousands. So what makes champagne so expensive? Champagne is often used as a generic term for sparkling wine, but in fact, champagne is only true champagne if it's made here, in Champagne. About 150 kilometers east of Paris, this highly protected region of France is home to the world's most prestigious and expensive champagne cellars and cellars, such as Moet and Chandon and Perrier-Jouet. All other sparkling wines made outside of this region, even those from neighbouring parts of France, must be labelled differently. Which means, in this relatively small area, a little over twice the size of San Francisco, the world's entire stock of true champagne is made. That's over 300 million bottles every year, with an annual revenue of over $5 billion. Champagne sales have grown steadily since the 1950s, but its future growth depends on the protection of the region's unique climate. Northern France's variable conditions are the first factor for elevated prices. With an average temperature of 50 degrees Fahrenheit, this location is cooler than France's other wine-growing regions, which gives the grapes the right acidity for sparkling wine production. However, an often freezing continental weather front makes the winemaking process more difficult than other dependable ecosystems.
La particularité du Champagne, c'est d'abord sa situation géographique et les conditions climatiques. Et ensuite, évidemment, c'est un processus d'élaboration qui a été peaufiné, qui a été amélioré au fil du temps, au fil des siècles maintenant, puisqu'on parle de plus de 2 siècles. On cueille des raisins, évidemment, à parfaite maturité. Ça, c'est déjà un critère très, très important. Et ensuite, eh bien, le processus de fermentation alcoolique va nous donner un vin blanc, ou plusieurs, ou une variété de vins blancs.
During harvest, 120,000 workers descend on Champagne to pick grapes from 84,000 acres of vines.
It's harvested by hand because the machine it's forbidden by law, and it's important to select only the best grapes, especially because of the heterogeneity of each different plots and each different vines. For me, it's really a good sign, an important sign of quality. To be on the hill, it's a really good thing for the exposition. The sun is always going on the vines all the day. When it's raining, the water never stops. It's going on the bottom. This is where, historically, we have the best structure of the soil. Champagne, it's clay and chalk. This is really the best quality in terms of soil.
Authentic champagne is produced via the méthode champenoise, where the wine undergoes a primary fermentation in oak or stainless steel vats and a secondary fermentation inside the bottle. This method is controlled and restricted within the European Union, so that wines from outside the Champagne region cannot be described as champagne. However, wines from all over the world are produced in exactly the same way, and instead are labelled as sparkling wine, produced via the méthode traditionnelle. Some winemakers in countries outside of the EU ignore European labelling laws altogether and continue to produce sparkling wine bearing the Champagne name. These imitations are constantly challenged by the Comité Champagne, which works with more than 80 lawyers worldwide to protect the authentic Champagne brand. Ultimately, despite similarities in production and possibly taste, only true champagne comes with the history and prestige of the region. Champagne production dates back to the 3rd century, when the Romans first planted vineyards in northeastern France. During the mid-17th century, with the development of bottled fermentation, champagne officially became a sacred drink, when it was served at the king's courts during the accession of Louis XIV. However, the carbon dioxide gas, which built up inside these early bottles, often caused them to explode in the cellars. Therefore, great efforts went into ridding the wine of its bubbles. But by the 19th century, the sparkling version of champagne had grown in popularity, especially among the rich and royalty, as the large champagne houses optimized mass production of sparkling champagne. With the development of thicker glass and corks, the modern champagne industry began to form. Amazingly, despite the region becoming a key battlefield during both World War I and World War II, some champagne production still continued. It's estimated that by the end of the Great War, about 40% of Champagne's vineyards had been destroyed. Because of the cutback in production, bottles made during either war fetch a high price. In 2015, Sotheby's auctioned a Krug cellar visit and a tasting of their wartime 1915 vintage for $116,000. Champagne's affiliation with luxury, wealth, and celebrity has kept prices high, from crowning kings to launching great ships. Even Jay-Z has gotten in on the action. In 2014, he became part owner of Armand de Brignac, also known as Ace of Spades, a champagne brand run by the Cartier family. In September 2019, they released their rarest, priciest cuvée yet, comprised of 3 vintages from 2009, 2010, and 2012. The wine was left to age for 6 years until the bottles, only 3,535 of them, were made available for a cool $1,000 per bottle. But what about the future? Champagne became the world's first wine-growing region to examine its carbon footprint and implement a carbon plan, as a result of worrying statistics. Global warming has seen temperatures in the region rise by 1.2 degrees Celsius over the last 30 years, and the grape harvest dates have moved forward by a fortnight. As Champagne's perfect climatic conditions are changing, and the Paris Accord climate targets fail to keep up with global warming, the future of winemaking in this historic region could be in jeopardy. And now popular across the world, anti-aging products can be some of the most expensive liquids on the planet. But are these products at all worth their huge price? Anti-aging products come in the form of creams and serums. They claim to make you look younger by reducing, hiding, or preventing the signs of aging. High-end anti-aging products are some of the most expensive single-use items in the world. Just 1 fluid ounce of this rejuvenating serum will cost you $1,800, making it one of the most expensive liquids on the planet. But do anti-aging products actually work? And does this explain why they're so expensive?
In all honesty, a number of these creams are used as placebo effects.
More expensive doesn't necessarily mean better or more effective.
Most anti-aging cosmetics, even budget items, tend to include a standard set of ingredients: water, glycerin, acids, oils, and vitamins. However, the costliest creams contain an array of extravagant additions. For example, Crème de la Mer includes a trademarked miracle broth, comprised of hand-harvested giant sea kelp, which it claims has self-regenerating powers.
These forests are a source of concentrated energy we unleash for skin's benefit. We call it miracle broth.
But according to skin experts, these expensive ingredients aren't guaranteed or necessarily proven to be more effective.
Often what companies will say is, my product contains this really interesting botanical or natural ingredient. It's therefore 10 times better at moisturizing the skin than something else. However, they're under no obligation to prove that it's that ingredient itself that is causing the moisturizing properties, or something very basic as glycerin, which is found in most moisturizers. Product claims don't necessarily have to stack up in such a necessarily rigorous way.
In the US, for example, anti-aging medications must have approval from the Food and Drug Administration for both safety and effectiveness, whereas anti-aging cosmetics, such as creams and serums, do not require FDA approval before they go on the market.
When it comes to anti-aging promises, it's a very grey area. A number of these companies promise people that they will actually reverse aging. They will actually make people look youthful again, simply by just allowing a clinical population to test your product. There's a great deal of smoke and mirrors at that stage, because in reality we can actually say with confidence that most of these clinical studies are not to be trusted.
And the price consumers pay for the most expensive products is significantly higher than the cost of production. A 2010 investigation by the Daily Mail found that recreating a 3.4-ounce pot of Crème de la Mer from readily available ingredients is estimated to cost roughly $35, whereas La Mer markets their products at $510. We contacted La Mer about this investigation, and they responded, saying, "The value of Crème de la Mer reflects the highest quality ingredients, the time-intensive and complex processes needed to create it, and the powerful skincare benefits experienced by its thousands of loyal devotees around the world."
When it comes to purchasing a very expensive product, most likely about 60 to 70% of the price that we might be paying is related to the cost of the manufacturer to produce and package the cream rather than the actual product.
But the desire to retain youthful looks is nothing new. Cleopatra is thought to have taken daily baths in donkey milk for its acidic properties, while women of the French court would pour aged wine on their faces, a process which is now recognised as having exfoliating benefits. But a blitz of beauty adverts in mid-20th century magazines that demonised women for having so-called middle-aged skin was the catalyst for a now booming anti-aging industry. The anti-aging market is expected to exceed $216 billion by the end of 2021, but a large part of that includes cosmetic procedures such as Botox and facelifts, arguably an extreme answer to our natural aging process.
I feel like I'm seeing a lot of young women in their mid-20s that are worried about skin aging. We are currently living in a society that is so focused on outwards aesthetics. So I think there is also a driving need for people more interested in things like laser surgery or injectables like Botox or filler from a much, much younger age than we've seen before.
So despite the lure of magical remedies and luxurious concoctions, avoiding skin damage and combating the signs of aging don't need to be so expensive.
Budget products can be equally as effective as their more expensive counterparts. The focus shouldn't be on the cost of the product. Wearing a good quality sunscreen, SPF minimum 30, ideally 50, throughout the year. The reason for that is that 80 to 90% of the signs that we associate with skin aging occur directly because of sunlight. So we're talking fine lines, wrinkles, pigmentation. Number 2 is the use of a vitamin A-based product or a retinoid. One doesn't need to spend a fortune, and probably once you're spending beyond more than £25–30 on a product, it's probably unnecessary.
Another new industry that suddenly emerged is CBD oil. And with the many surrounding health claims, a 50 milliliter bottle can cost over $200. Depending on who you ask, CBD oil can be a miracle cure, a snake oil placebo, or something vague in between. This poorly regulated industry, which has boomed over the last 3 years, is a minefield for newcomers. Considering that manufacturers are unauthorized to make medical claims, how can one CBD oil cost $50, while another of the same volume costs $390? And are premium CBD oils justified for being so expensive? Firstly, what is CBD?
CBD stands for cannabidiol. That's a chemical name for one of the chemicals in the cannabis plant. The CBD oil that you're seeing on shelves that consumers can buy without a prescription is actually from low THC, the stuff that makes you high, varieties of the cannabis plant.
CBD is a new and rapidly growing phenomenon, with sales tripling in the last 3 years. But the line between what consumers are using it for and what manufacturers can say to attract them is increasingly blurred.
It can be used for a variety of purposes, things like inflammation, anxiety, stress, and it can also be used just to support general wellness. Now, the differentiating criteria between a medicine and a supplement is you cannot make a claim that it treats or cures a specific medically diagnosed disease. And that's really important for companies to understand because they can get their products pulled off the shelves and they can also potentially, sometimes unintentionally mislead consumers.
But in the age of anxiety, it's no surprise that CBD has become a hot ticket for manufacturers who infuse all sorts of products with cannabidiol, shrewdly tapping into its perceived wellness benefits and bumping up the price of otherwise standard items like gummies, sportswear, tampons, and even dog treats. But how do we assess the value of CBD oil, which is actually produced in 2 different ways?
A full or broad spectrum product is made from the whole plant extract. They take the flower and they process it and they come up with an extract that not only has CBD, but it has other plant chemicals, other cannabinoids, other terpenoids, other things in the plant that work together in this, what's called this herbal synergy, this entourage effect. And what you get is greater than the sum of its parts.
But some manufacturers process the extract even further into CBD isolate, a substance devoid of all other plant chemicals and labelled as pure CBD. But this isolate, which often features in expensive products, is generally considered to be less effective and cheaper to make.
Some brands and some companies will put CBD isolate into a product and then brand it as a premium product, even though the cost of actually making it, because the cost of the isolate is quite a lot lower than the cost of a full or broad spectrum CBD.
But because of lax regulations in the industry, this fundamental difference in CBD oils is often disguised by manufacturers. The front of this premium $300 bottle, for example, does not display that it is in fact made from isolate.
Sometimes you have to dig into the nitty-gritty of the ingredients, and sometimes you might have to call the company and see what they've actually used. But in general, the labeling criteria are becoming a little bit stricter, so more and more consumers will be able to know what is a CBD isolate product and what comes from a full or broad spectrum source.
These products can also be measured by the amount of cannabidiol in each bottle.
What you really need to look for is the number of milligrams in the entire bottle, and then the number of milligrams of CBD per dose. And that's really going to tell you the bang for buck.
But even high dosage, full spectrum CBD doesn't have the approval from the Food and Drug Administration. The FDA says it recognizes the significant public interest in cannabis and cannabis-derived compounds, particularly CBD. However, there are many unanswered questions about the science, safety, and quality of products containing CBD. More worryingly, lab tests conducted by the Centre for Medicinal Cannabis found that 62% of CBD products tested in the UK didn't contain the cannabidiol content promised on the label. One product actually contained no CBD whatsoever. CBD is shrouded in mystery and confusion for the consumer. On the one hand, a 2018 cross-sectional study of CBD users found that almost 62% reported using CBD to treat a medical condition, stating that CBD has broad therapeutic value. But on the other hand, manufacturers cannot use the research data to make medical claims, leaving spokespeople in the unenviable position of having to promote their products to a certain demographic while avoiding endorsing the public's perception of CBD.
So what we're not allowed to do with our products is make any medicinal claims because they're not medical products. All our products that we sell are wellness products to improve sleeps and moods. We see CBD as a homeostasis product which balances the levels in your body to get you into a normal state and balanced mind.
Thankfully, despite the misconceptions, no matter what you use it for, there is a way to get a snapshot of the quality of CBD oil.
You want to look for a certificate of analysis. That means that is a third-party tested lab report. They test their product and make sure that it's not contaminated, make sure it doesn't have accidental THC levels above the allowed limit, make sure it doesn't have heavy metals in it, make sure there's no microbials, so bacteria or fungus that can grow in these plants, no herbicides, pesticides, things you don't want in it.
So why is it so expensive? The cost of producing CBD oil isn't particularly high in relation to other large-scale crops, but there appears to be a premium on all cannabidiol, as revealed in this comparison of full-spec CBD, which shows that its prices grow pretty uniformly according to the price per milligram in each bottle. With any wellness product with a global hype, high demand means high prices. Statistics show that sales of CBD will likely reach $1.8 billion in the next 2 years. But without regulation, medical research, and clear consumer knowledge, the human value of CBD oil will, for now, remain a matter of opinion. Gold has been used as a currency since its discovery, and its rich colour has been sought after for centuries. So what makes this rare metal so precious? Gold is the shining embodiment of wealth. Not only is it used to make expensive products, but it's also used to add extra bling to luxurious items, from smartphones to supercars, and even beefsteaks. But other metals that are rarer than gold are much cheaper. So why is gold so expensive? Scientists believe gold arrived on Earth after the collision of two neutron stars in space forged gold atoms together into meteorites, which crashed into Earth about 3.9 billion years ago. Over millions of years, Earth's bubbling hot core forced gold nuggets towards the surface. Gold flakes have been found in Paleolithic caves estimated to date back roughly 40,000 years, marking the first known instance of human contact with the material. But what exactly is gold? Gold is a relatively rare metal, with lots of versatility. It's highly malleable, meaning it can be deformed or changed without fracturing the material. But what distinguishes it from other useful precious metals is its totally unique bright yellow appearance. These factors give gold many practical and superficial uses on Earth.
If you're a bride, gold is the perfect embodiment of love and emotion. If you're an investor, gold's an excellent portfolio diversification tool. People like to know that they've got an element of their wealth which they can feel. Often it looks beautiful, it's got a wonderful design on it, and that adds a degree of emotion to the investment. And if you're a manufacturer, if you're someone making smartphones or tablets, gold is an element with the symbol AU and the atomic number 79, viewed as the most noble of all of the noble metals. It's a perfect material for conducting electricity, and it doesn't corrode, it doesn't rust, so it's great to have in your product.
Over many centuries, civilizations across the globe became enamored with the beautiful metal, such as the ancient Egyptians. Not only did they use it as a currency, they also buried themselves in gold, believing it to be the flesh of the gods. In fact, King Tutankhamun was laid to rest in 3 gold-wrapped coffins, the innermost of which was made from sheets of pure beaten gold, which would now be worth over $1 million. In 1792, the US Congress passed the Coinage Act, which established a fixed price of gold to US dollars. Over the next century, gold mining captured people's imagination during the Great US Gold Rush. The first was in 1799, after 12-year-old Conrad Reed discovered a huge 17-pound gold nugget on his family's farm in North Carolina. 50 years later, in 1849, tens of thousands of prospectors, known as the 49ers, raced to San Francisco in search of riches, giving name to the San Francisco 49ers football franchise. These gold rushes heralded the start of modern-day gold mining. Despite humans mining gold for millennia, the complexity of this process hasn't changed.
Mining is just as challenging and difficult as it's ever been before. What's changed probably is the kind of the labour intensity in some mines as people have increasingly used technology, but some of the challenges aren't necessarily associated purely with mine production. They could be associated with the environments within which they're operating, so licenses that people need to operate, whether it's a formal licence from a government or a social licence from a local community. I mean, those are still challenges that mining companies need to navigate and kind of work their way through, and that contributes to the complexity of mine production today, probably just as much as it did many, many years ago.
Identifying gold mines is a daunting task. It can take up to 10 years for geologists, chemists, and engineers to examine a potential site, and even then, the likelihood of a mine being developed into a productive gold mine is less than 0.1%. Only 10% of these sites contain enough gold to justify further development. But above ground, gold is everywhere. On our fingers, around our necks, and even in our mouths. Gold is used in medicine, architecture, and almost every electronic component. We even launch gold back out into the universe from where it came, not only as a reliable component of spacecraft circuitry, but also in the lining of astronauts' visors to protect them from the sun's harmful heat and ultraviolet light. So with all that in mind, it might surprise you to know how little gold there actually is here on Earth. If you melted down the world's entire above-ground stock of around 190,000 tons of gold, it would form a 72-foot cube. However, if that was divided up equally for every person on Earth, we'd all get roughly an ounce of pure 24-karat gold each. That's about $1,500 worth. So how does this volume divide out into different industries?
If we have a look at the 190,000 tons of stock of gold above ground, the lion's share of it's in jewellery. Around about 50% of it is in jewellery. The next level down comes to private investment, so that could be individuals holding bars or coins, or indeed individuals holding a share of an exchange-traded fund. And then you've got central banks. Central banks account for around about 17% of that stock of gold, so a very significant volume. And then the final element, around about 13-14%, is technology or dentistry.
Is the future of gold as bright as its surface? new deposits of gold are increasingly hard to come by and increasingly difficult to locate. Geologists have estimated that only 55 tons remains buried away in the Earth's crust, which means if current global mining rates continued, we could run out of newfound gold in just 20 years. So as gold mining continues to slow and the costs associated with mining increase to meet the challenge of extraction, gold could become even more expensive. In Japan, tamahagane, or precious steel, is used to make intricately crafted Japanese swords. These blades can take months or even years of work to make. Japanese sword making is a tradition that goes back centuries, and one that's carried on to this day. Each sword requires dedication, skill, and can take over 18 months to create. The resulting blades can be worth thousands of dollars. So what makes them so expensive?
So 世界中に鉄器があって、ナイフ刀剣の文化はあるわけです。ですがこの、焼きを入れたその鋼をきれいに磨き上げてその鉄を鑑賞するという文化があるのは日本独自のものなんですね。
Master Akihira has been making swords for 21 years. He was inspired by a sword crafted by the legendary 13th century swordsmith Masamune, and after a 5-year apprenticeship and years of training, he became one of the 180 swordsmiths working across Japan. Japanese swords have always been more than just weapons. They were artworks, status symbols, and throughout history held a huge spiritual importance.
日本では古くからですね、このように美しく磨き上げられた刀身、鋼には魔を打ち払う力があると信じられてきたんです。そういうようなものを打ち払う力が刀にあると考えて、刀を非常に大切にしたし、それを身につけることによってよこしまなものから身を守ろうとしたんです。決してこれがね、戦いの道具として日本人と共にあったというわけではないんですよ。現在では確かに美術品として我々刀鍛冶は作っているわけですけども、やはり非常によく切れるように作られていますし、もしいざという時があるならば、武士が命を懸けられるだけのものに私は作っているつもりですから。今の現代の私たちの刀鍛冶がこうやって刀を作っている理由というのも、やはり絵を楽しまれる、絵を鑑賞して楽しまれる方がいるように、刀をコレクションして楽しまれる方がいるんですね。そういう方のために作ることもあるし、あるいは、子供ができた、あるいはお孫さんができた、娘がお嫁に行く、そういった場合のお守り刀として作ってほしいということで、こうやって刀を。
Each sword is a unique artwork, and one that is made to be admired as you would a painting. As sheets of steel are folded into each other again and again, wood grain-like patterns form, and these patterns, coupled with the skill of the swordmaster, create a completely unique blade.
なぜこうやって姿を見るかというと、私たち刀の仕事をしている人間、あるいは刀の好きな人間からすると、まず刀の姿を見ると、古い刀であればその刀が作られた時代が分かりますし、現代のものであればその作家がどういう時代のものを狙って作ったかなという、作為が分かります。
Knowing what to look for in each sword is important. Characteristics like the angle and length of the blade, or the way the metal is folded, could give away the era in which it was made, and even who made it.
切っ先の部分というのが、いろんな直線曲線が集まる場所でもあって、ここは刀鍛冶の腕の見せ所でもあるし、その刀を研いだ研ぎ師さんの腕の見せ所でもあります。だから僕らはこういうところを見て、この刀鍛冶はうまいなとか、あるいはこの研ぎ師さんはうまいななんてことを思うわけです。またこの、そうですね、刃縁、この白い刃文の 上の方、この境目のあたりにはですね、そうですね、まるでこう星を散らしたようなこうキラキラした粒が見えてくると思うんです。
Looking at the months of work that go into creating each blade, it's easy to see why these swords command such a high price. And as there are less and less sword masters across Japan, these works of art are only going to become more valuable.
作品として常に最高のものを作らなくてはいけないという責任感と使命感のようなものがあります。それは一つには僕のプライドをかけて常にいいものを作らなくてはいけないという気持ちです。その中にはですね、僕の刀を持つ人に喜んでもらいたいということもあるけれど、もう一つは1000年経ってその1000年後の人が僕の刀を見た時にいい作品だなと言ってくれる、そういうものを作りたい。
Across the sea in Malaysia, we wanted to take a moment to look at one of the cheapest products for a change, and one of the most controversial, palm oil. Palm oil is cheap and ubiquitous. It's used in thousands of everyday products and is the most widely consumed vegetable oil on the planet. You can get a kilo of palm oil for just $2, but its usage has become unsurprisingly controversial, as huge areas of rainforest have been cut down or burned to make way for palm plantations. So why is this oil still so cheaply and readily available? Palm oil is in everything, from chocolate to bread, instant noodles to shampoo. And without even really thinking about it, globally, we each consume on average about 8 kilos of palm oil every year. But even if you look through the ingredients of your product, you may not be able to spot it, because written on the back label, you could see any of these. These days, Indonesia and Malaysia make up 85% of all palm oil production. But the oil palm species used actually originated in West Africa. The trees were introduced to Malaysia in 1875. But for 100 years, something was missing. For years, the flowers were pollinated by hand, requiring hundreds of workers and limiting efficiency. Until in 1981, African palm weevils were introduced to the country. These little beetles pollinated the plants with no extra work from humans. And suddenly, palm oil yields boomed. Since this, palm oil's popularity has done nothing but rise. Demand spiked again in the 90s, as companies suddenly realized the negative health implications of the trans fats found in many processed products and replaced them with palm oil. And as ultra-processed foods increased, so did the use of the oil. But this incredible rise came at a cost. The rapid expansion of palm oil plantations has led to the destruction of huge areas of tropical rainforest, creating dangerous CO2 emissions and destroying the remaining habitats of already endangered species.
It's extremely cheap. It's shelf stable. It has natural preservative qualities. It is a really good vegetable oil, but the fact is, it has been grown in a way that's caused a lot of environmental damage and has also impacted communities and the workers that have been employed to harvest the material.
Seeing the devastation caused, your first instinct might be to cut out palm oil completely. But searching for an alternative might actually make things worse. Palm oil is so efficient that using an alternative oil would require up to 10 times the land to grow. This efficiency is the main reason the oil is so cheap. Oil palm trees are evergreen and perennial. They produce oil all year round and can happily grow in soils that many other plants can't. NGOs and companies from around the world came together to set up the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil in 2004 to create a set of criteria to grow this crop sustainably. But it's only since 2018 that the Round Table has embraced the high carbon stock approach, a system that helps identify valuable areas of forest and keeps the palm oil they certify completely deforestation free.
The fact is, it's just a plant. It's how and where we've done it and how we've grown it that causes the problem. But that means that it's a human problem. We created the issue. That means that we also have the ability to solve that issue, to fix that issue.
Fixing this problem isn't going to be easy though.
There are numerous barriers that exist for companies trying to implement zero deforestation commitments. So one of those is the fact that you have highly complex supply chains and it's difficult to know exactly where your palm oil is coming from. Another one is that you have varying levels of government support in different regions that produce palm oil, and the extent of government support, it plays an important role in whether a company can produce without deforestation for complex reasons.
So, are we doing enough? The Roundtable now certifies about 19% of palm oil worldwide, but getting to this point has been a long, slow process, and we're running out of time.
Critically, global consumption for palm oil will invariably increase until 2050 as we approach 9.6 billion people.
You also have the persistence of large markets such as China and India, where there is a much more of an emphasis on price rather than the sustainability profile of the product. And this means that if you're a manufacturer, say, and you're trying to buy palm oil and encourage your suppliers to make sure that their production is deforestation free, you have limited leverage because they always have an alternative market they can sell into. So there are these challenges with implementing a commitment to zero deforestation, which make it very difficult to achieve.
India, China and Indonesia now account for nearly 40% of all palm oil consumed, and it looks like palm oil is going to remain cheap for a while longer, but the cost to the planet could be devastating. But it's not just palm oil that's the problem.
Palm oil still pales in comparison in terms of its contribution to deforestation. It pales in comparison with cattle and beef products, which some estimates indicate may be responsible for as much as a quarter of all tropical deforestation.
Global Canopy published a list of 500 companies and financial institutions linked to tropical deforestation from soy, palm, cattle and timber. Only half of these companies have made zero deforestation a commitment by 2020. And not a single one of these companies is on track to make this target. Global Canopy also says that despite the commitments that have been made, evidence shows that rates of commodity-driven deforestation have not decreased since 2001.
Whether it's palm, soy, beef, leather, all ingredients, companies have a responsibility not to wait for the consumer to make the demand. They have a responsibility to do it before the consumer demands. Any forest that's being cleared as we face what many would call a climate crisis is too much. So what we know we have to do is we have to take a very hard look at how we consume things, why we're consuming, and how we go about sourcing and growing our materials like palm oil or soy, beef, or cotton.
Over in Dubai is one of the largest camel milk farms in the world. The milk is popular across the Middle East and Africa, but farming camels isn't exactly easy. Camel milk can cost you $30 per litre. Compare that to cow's milk, and it's almost 30 times the price. But for hundreds of years, camels have been used to produce milk, yogurt, and even cheese. So why would anyone milk a camel? And what makes the milk so expensive? Camel milk may not be quite as popular as cow milk. Compared to the 600 million metric tons of cow milk produced worldwide, only about 3 million tons of camel milk are produced each year. However, camel milk is an important staple across Africa and the Middle East, and some cultures rely on it. Somalia and Kenya alone produce 64% of the world's camel milk. Camelicious in Dubai has over 6,000 camels on its farm and produces 4 million litres of milk each year.
And as you know, the people in the Middle East connected with the camels for transport and for food. And their main diet was camel milk and dates. So it's a long history. The demand for camel milk increasing day by day, and we are facing now a challenge which to meet the demand because the supply is less than the demand.
This demand has kept the price high, and camel milk's profile as a new health food has boosted sales. It's slightly lower in saturated fat, has 10 times the vitamin C, and has more calcium and potassium than cow's milk. These benefits have led many people to start using it as an alternative medicine, despite very limited evidence. Online celebrity endorsements have also led more and more people to try it. While new camel farms are appearing across the world, the popularity is still limited. And in Europe, there are still 12,000 cows for every single camel. But even if you do have a lot of camels, it's not exactly easy work to get the milk.
Roughly we are milking 1,300 camels twice a day, so it's a very intense work. Lots of people are included into the job. So when camels are arriving here, they go through a very strict quarantine procedure where we check them for different diseases. Whenever needed, we treat them, and we start training them for the milking parlor. It's very crucial that we provide a very relaxed, very calm atmosphere for the camels during milking to be able to release the milk. So we had to train the camel to be able to milk them without the calf. So that was a very intensive work, and every camel is different. So for some camels, the training itself for the milking parlor takes 2-3 days, but for some camels it took weeks.
Once this training period is over and your camels are producing milk, you still don't get anywhere near as much as you would from a cow.
One cow can give around like 50 liters per day, while the camel milk can give 6 to 7 liters. The cows in 3 years will give more than 50,000 liters, while in the camels in 3 years you will get maximum 4 to 7,000 liters.
Unlike the dairy industry, where male calves are often killed and disposed of, every camel must be kept near its young to continue producing milk, meaning that 2 animals will need to be kept fed and healthy to produce just 7 liters of milk each day.
Camel milk is costly. In addition to that, the feed cost. We are here at Camelicious giving our camels natural and fresh alfalfa hay, in addition to wheat bran only. We are not giving any concentrates or any feed additives.
So after all this work, what does the milk actually taste like?
Smells like milk. Yeah, it does have a different taste to it.
It's a bit salty. I would say saltier than normal milk, but it's quite creamy.
I don't hate it. It's almost like salty.
I would say it doesn't taste like regular milk. I would have it again.
As this milk grows in popularity, and selective breeding leads to camels that produce more milk, the price may come down. But for now, camel milk remains an expensive luxury.
Camel is a different species, so we didn't want and still don't want to turn them into a milking machine because we are thinking long term. So we would like to have a long production life here with these camels on this farm.
From the Middle East to California, avocados' prevalence has risen dramatically over the last few years. But as their popularity has increased, so have their prices. Avocado has become one of the world's trendiest foods. As the poster child of millennial healthy eating, this superfood is now a mainstay for foodies everywhere. But have you noticed your avo on toast is costing more and more? Avocado prices have rocketed in recent years by up to 129%, with the average national price of a single Hass avocado reaching $2.10 in 2019, almost doubling in just 1 year. So why are avocados so expensive? Archaeologists in Peru have found domesticated avocado seeds buried with Incan mummies dating back to 750 BC. but it was the Aztecs in 500 BC who named it Ahuacatl, which translates to testicle. When Spanish conquistadors swept through Mexico and Central America in the 16th century, they renamed it aguacate. The farming of aguacate developed over the next few hundred years, predominantly in Central America and South America, but consumption of the alligator pear outside of these regions before the late 19th century was almost non-existent. The commercialization of aguacate began in the early 1900s, but was focused on branding avocados as a delicacy for the wealthy, like this advert in the New Yorker from 1920, which declared them as the aristocrat of salad fruit. But a selection of Californian growers realized that the hard-to-pronounce aguacate was off-putting for the mass market, so they formed the California Avocado Association. By the 1950s, production scale grew and avocado prices fell to about 25 cents each. Popularity increased further with the wave of inter-American immigration in the 60s, as Latin Americans brought their love of avocados with them to the US. But as demand increased, supply had to keep up, and the true difficulties of yielding large-scale avocado crops began to show. Avocado orchards require an extraordinary amount of costly resources in order to flourish.
There are multiple inputs that avocados require, whether it's water, fertilizer, pruning, pest control, the sunburn protection of trees. All those go into making your chances better of having a very good quality crop. When we decide to plant an avocado orchard, we'll plant trees that come from certified nurseries. We have to place our orders years in advance. On average, if we're producing 100,000 pounds per acre, that takes about 1 million gallons of water, so 100 gallons per pound. So it'd be about 50 gallons per 8-ounce fruit. But that's dependent on what Mother Nature will throw at you. You know, we have wind, we have intense sun. It's really hard for a grower to manage the unmanageable things that will affect a crop.
The surge in popularity of avocados stalled during the fat-fighting frenzy of the 1980s, with an average of only 1 pound per capita being consumed in America by 1989. The decade's low-fat obsession drove consumers away from avocado because of its high fat content, without really understanding the nutritional truth hidden within.
When it comes to fat in food in general, people tend to get a little bit concerned because we often hear in the media that fat isn't good for us. But the type of fat that's in avocados is monounsaturated fat, which is actually often deemed healthy fat or heart-healthy fat. So while there is a lot of fat in avocados, it's actually quite good fat.
Avocado started its meteoric comeback at the turn of the millennium, and it was helped by an unlikely political decision. In 2005, the US Department of Agriculture lifted a 90-year-old ban to allow the importation of Mexican avocados to all 50 states. Initially, this decision angered Californian growers, who feared the move could slash local growers' sales by as much as 20%.
What actually had transpired and took place was, as that Mexican supply became much more prevalent and available, retailers got behind marketing and selling avocados. Food service providers, restaurants started putting it as permanent parts of their menus. And demand started to boom because the inconsistent supply chains before were now consistent, and consumers were allowed to enjoy avocados every day of the year.
The biggest day of the avocado calendar became Super Bowl Sunday, when it's now estimated that almost 200 million pounds of avocados are eaten during the big game in America. But if you take a moment to consider the resources needed to produce that amount, you can start to understand avocados' elevated prices. According to experts, it takes roughly 270 litres of water to grow a pound of avocados. So 200 million pounds could require as much as 54 billion litres of water, which means droughts or heat waves can have devastating consequences on the avocado industry. In fact, that's exactly what's been happening in California for the last 7 years, with the Sunshine State only recently being declared drought-free in 2019, which goes a long way to explaining record avocado prices. In some countries, like Chile, avocado cultivation is being blamed for exacerbating droughts, as lush green orchards overlook dry riverbeds. Perhaps the biggest reason for avocado's rise to dominance is the emergence of the clean-eating lifestyle. No longer just a chip dip for special occasions, this superfood can be found in a plethora of recipes in cafes and restaurants everywhere around the world. And those who are eating them are really keen for you to know about it. Just type #avocado into Instagram, and you'll be hit with over 10 million search results. But is the glorification of avocado justified?
There's quite a big hype around avocados, but it actually is quite justified when it comes to how nutrient dense this food is. There's not many foods that actually replicate it in terms of a nutritional profile. When it comes to calling something a superfood, I'm not really for that label. Avocados are definitely a good food to include in your diet, but like I said, you're not really missing out if you don't like them or if you can't eat them for any reason. Monounsaturated fats, we can find that in things like olive oil and olive, nuts and seeds, vitamins and minerals. We can find that in other green vegetables, so spinach and broccoli and things like that. So there's ways of getting those nutrients in without having avocado.
All of this produce requires an astonishing amount of labour. Even once grown, pruned and picked, avocados need costly distribution methods in order to be delivered fresh and ripe to far-flung corners of the world.
If you're living in Philadelphia, right, you want to buy a ripe avocado in Philadelphia. What they do is they ship green avocados from California to Philadelphia. They send them to the ripening center. They warm them up and get ethylene in them so they all ripen. And then when they're moved out to the retail stores, you're actually buying something that's almost ready to eat or ready to eat. Because if you were to buy a green avocado that's shipped straight from California to your market, you would have to ripen it yourself over 7 to 10 day period. And most consumers are a little more anxious for their avocado toast than waiting 10 days.
With prices so high, the commodity of avocados has attracted a spate of thefts from orchards and delivery trucks worldwide. In New Zealand, armed night patrols and electric fences have been introduced after a grower in Northland had 70% of his orchard stolen. There's even further grim reading for avocado lovers. In Michoacan, where 80% of Mexico's avocados originate, cartels run a so-called blood avocado trade, violently enforcing a non-negotiable extortion fee from farmers based on the size of their land and the weight of their crop. Some restaurants have begun an avocado boycott as we all weigh up the ethics behind our eating habits. Experts suggest that water shortages could affect 5 billion people by 2050, and rainfall in the so-called drought belt, which includes Mexico and South America, is predicted to decline. But whilst evidence of environmental degradation is mounting, the avocado industry is still growing, along with consumer demand. In certain places, the sustainability of avocado production will become untenable. Also rising in popularity is Apple. In 2018, it became the first company to be worth $1 trillion. But how did it get to this point? And what makes its products so expensive? In 2016, the iPhone 7 started at $649. 3 years later, Apple's flagship iPhone costs 54% more. It's even more dramatic for the Mac Mini. When Apple released its new model, the price increased by 60%. These prices bring in huge profits for Apple. As the US's first trillion-dollar company, Apple's market cap is higher than the GDP of Switzerland. So what makes Apple products so expensive?
Apple has, over the years, built a reputation for quality and the industrial design of its products.
That reputation has created millions of loyal customers.
I've been here about 36 hours now. Man, I'm super excited, I'm not even gonna lie. I can't wait to get my hands on it, man. It's only £1,000, man. I'm getting two, man.
So that brand loyalty translates into a premium that they're able to extract from customers who are unwilling to switch out of the Apple ecosystem.
That premium is also known as the Apple tax, or paying more simply because it's an Apple product. The 256GB MacBook Air, for example, costs $1,299. But you can get a more powerful Windows laptop for over $100 less. Apple's high prices reached meme proportions during the announcement of its Mac Pro in June 2019. Claps turned to gasps when John Ternus unveiled a $1,000 monitor stand as an add-on for the $5,000 Mac Pro display.
And the Pro stand, $999. And like the Mac Pro, they'll all be available in the fall.
In truth, $6,000 for a professional reference monitor of this quality is comparable to the competition. But that didn't matter. Apple had botched the messaging, and its $1,000 stand became infamous.
Apple does something else that's a bit sneaky, which is that when you're buying the iPhone, you can't add memory to it. So if you want more memory, you have to pay more Apple tax.
With Apple's computers, these upgrades get even more expensive. If you want a 13-inch MacBook Pro with 512 gigabytes of storage, you have to pay $400 more than the base model. And Apple's accessories also have high premiums compared to non-Apple products, like its $129 keyboard or its $79 mouse. Even Apple's cables cost more. Apple has kept its proprietary Lightning connector while removing useful ports, like the headphone jack and the SD card reader, forcing consumers to buy expensive dongles, like its $39 SD card to USB-C reader. But are these products worth the premium? Apple loves to talk about its innovation.
These are the most powerful and most advanced iPhones that we have ever built in a stunning new design.
And iPhones have added great features, like OLED displays, faster processors, and thin bezels. But competing products have many of the same features.
The components that go into making a smartphone are fairly standardized. For example, Sony competes with Apple in smartphones, but all of the camera sensors that go into an iPhone are made by Sony.
And those components cost a lot less than a new iPhone.
The bill of materials is about $490 for a phone that is priced at $1,099. As a comparison point, the Galaxy S10 Plus is about $420 bill of materials for a price of $999.
Something changed when Apple released the iPhone X. Not only was it more expensive, but the difference between the bill of materials and the retail cost was much greater. Obviously, Apple wants to make a profit, so the bill of materials has to cost less than the device. What makes Apple special is its ability to pull larger profits than its competitors. Instead of a technology company, think of Apple as a luxury brand. As with Gucci or Hermes, customers pay more because the logo is a status symbol. That handbag isn't a more functional bag, but customers still value it more.
So our products become an extension of our personality. I value elegance, I value design, I value simplicity, I value it just works. And that is what inspires a lot of loyalty and allows Apple to extract a premium for their products.
Why are Apple products so expensive?
Because the design's very sleek.
I think because they make premium hardware and people are willing to pay for a simple, seamless experience.
They're catering to people that really love ease of use and user friendliness, and I think that layer of design probably costs a little bit, and I'm happy to pay for it.
They are expensive because they know we will buy all of their things, no matter how expensive it is.
Samsung, Android, Apple, thank you.
I think that customer loyalty is hard to earn, but when you do earn the customer loyalty, love is blind.
But this strategy might not work forever. Competition with less expensive Android phones has got steeper, and that's put the iPhone's market share at risk.
Apple's performance in India is pathetic to the point that their market share has now slipped to less than 2%, has become completely irrelevant. And the primary reason there is that the price points are simply unaffordable for the Indian market.
If Apple can't sell more iPhones, it might have to sell fewer iPhones for more money. Charging a premium allows Apple to keep increasing its revenue. Even if its biggest category, the iPhone, is declining.
See, whenever you create a new product, what you want to do is to extract all of the premium that you can from the higher end customers, people who are willing to pay a premium.
That means the customers who buy the iPad Pro or the $5,000 iMac Pro. Apple does offer cheaper models, like the iPhone 11 or the 11-inch iPad. But those aren't always the models customers choose.
This is called extremeness aversion. Because you don't want to buy the cheapest, you don't want to buy the most expensive, so the middle one looks like a compromise.
But Mohan pointed out that Apple has a disadvantage compared to true luxury brands.
A luxury product is like a Rolex, right? You'd keep it for a lifetime, but you can't keep a smartphone for a lifetime. So premium, perhaps not luxury.
For now, Apple's reputation remains strong, and the customers who don't want to spend $1,000 on a new phone, Apple has a plan for that. Keep the old models around, just at a very slight discount. But if Apple wants to keep its loyal customers, its innovation will have to keep pace with its premiums. It may feel like it costs a lot to travel the world, but compared to just 50 years ago, the price of air travel has dropped dramatically. 60 years ago, air travel was far too expensive for the masses. Book a flight between New York and London on Pan Am in 1960, and you'd be paying somewhere around $300, or about $2,600 adjusted for inflation. But in 2019, you can catch the same flight for almost a tenth of the price. It looks like flying has never been cheaper, but is that the real story? And how did we get here? The first scheduled commercial flight took place in 1914. It had one passenger, and was piloted by this guy, Tony Janus. The flight was from St. Petersburg to Tampa. What would have been a 12-hour train ride became a quick 23-minute trip. The flight proved that there was demand for scheduled aviation as transportation. Janus is largely credited with laying the groundwork for the modern aviation business, which has grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry. In 2018, there were an estimated 45 million flights worldwide, and the average fare for a domestic flight in the US was $350. Now, $350 is hardly considered cheap, but take a look at this graph. Average ticket prices have been steadily decreasing since 1980. In fact, tickets are close to their lowest prices ever. But from 1950 to 1980, flying was different. Before 1978, fares and routes in the US were closely regulated by the federal government, and many routes had fixed minimum prices.
What ended up happening is you got into a highly regulated industry where the federal government set the various routes that you could fly, set how much prices could be, and the airlines were raking in the dollars.
The story across Europe was slightly different, as most airlines were state-controlled, and air travel was treated as a public service. But in 1978, everything changed. Then President Jimmy Carter signed the Airline Deregulation Act, and the aviation industry was open for business. Free from government regulation, airlines now had one goal: to sell tickets.
What really happened after deregulation was just this massive fight. Airlines were doing everything to get market share and not really looking at profitability. The theory was the more people we can get onto a plane, the more we can dominate the market, the more we're winning. But they didn't really look at it as a business where you needed at the end of the day to make a profit. And as soon as you had one little economic hiccup, a bit of a recession or a spike in oil prices, that's when airlines really started to fail.
At the same time, aircraft technology was also advancing, which made the planes more efficient. New wing technology was implemented, such as winglets, which made planes more aerodynamic and reduced flight times. Computer systems began to replace older cockpit technology, making the planes less reliant on pilots. Shortly after planes got computers, so did people, and pricing began to get even more competitive. Websites like Expedia and Priceline, launched in the late 90s, began to catalogue all of the lowest prices. Budget airline models were able to thrive because of this, as consumers would regularly click the cheapest prices. For many airlines, this competition was unsustainable. Over the years, a lot of companies folded, merged, or absorbed one another. And today, the 4 largest US airlines control 80% of the market. One of these 4, Southwest, has a fleet of 753 planes, each of which has an average of 6 flights per day. That's about 4,000 flights a day. And while that may sound like a lot, that frequency is decreasing across America. This is because something called load factor is increasing.
One of the key metrics for the airlines is called load factor, and this is basically your occupancy. How many seats do you have available, and what percentage of those are being sold or occupied by passengers?
Basically, that means aircraft are flying at full capacity or close to it more often. And this is good for airlines, and for flyers, sort of. Airlines are able to keep fares low because most of the seats have been sold, which isn't always great for passengers. Ever been the last one on the plane and there's no more overhead luggage space? or had no room for your legs because the seats are so close together. There are tons of budget airlines around the world. Some of the more notable ones are Ryanair, Norwegian, Spirit, and Frontier. These companies usually charge extra for traditionally included amenities, like reserving your seat, while cutting costs wherever they can.
This issue of cramming more passengers onto planes is happening all across the world. You look at a discount carrier like Ryanair, based in Ireland but flies all over Europe. They're looking at putting 200 people on a Boeing 737. This is a plane that some airlines are still flying with 150, 160 passengers. That's really, really crowded, but it maximizes profit. And when you fly in an airline like Ryanair, you know exactly what you're getting.
So, take that $320 flight on Norwegian from New York to London. Need anything other than one small piece of hand luggage? The fare jumps to $490. Want a refundable ticket and 2 checked bags? Suddenly you're at $1,379. That's about $100 more than the inflation-adjusted 1977 price, which came with all of those extras included as standard, and more legroom too. And non-budget airlines have seen the potential profit in this budget model. More and more airlines are beginning to charge hidden fees on top of the ticket price, from checking baggage to just choosing your seat. Find the right deals though, and flying can be cheaper than ever. But that original price you saw advertised may be misleading. And the experience that you get these days might not be the most pleasant, as manufacturers continue to cut costs. But the world of bargain budget fares may not last. Aviation emissions are predicted to possibly triple by 2050. And many countries have begun implementing stricter environmental taxes for flights.
Overall, there's little that the industry can squeeze out of airfare right now. They're going to get much more efficient with aircraft, and that's going to mean less fuel burning, but the cost of labor is probably not going to go down. You still need good quality people to fly airplane and be your flight attendants.